Hello and welcome. So, if you've been watching my vlogs, then you know that I've been reading Girl Serpent Thorn by Melissa Bashardoust. And today, I gotta talk about it. Like, I have feelings. This book, I definitely have mixed feelings, and I need to talk about it. So, let's get started. Hi, my name is Danielle Forrest. I'm an alien romance author, and on this channel, I do videos about me, my writing, and anything related to those topics. Today, I'm talking about Girl Serpent Thorn, which is a book by Melissa Bashardoust, and it's it's a mixed bag. It's definitely a mixed bag, and so I should say, first and foremost, this is a book that includes a lot of culturally specific terminology and words and names. As such, there is a very real possibility I may not pronounce things correctly. That's always a risk whenever you're dealing with something that's not related to your own culture. So, just a word of warning. And that gets me right into my first topic, which has to do with that very same terminology. And the fact the author does a piss poor job of introducing it most of the time. Um, and this is something that, as an alien romance author, as a science fiction author, is something really important to me because it's something that I have to deal with all the time. I create a lot of new terminology in my books that I have to introduce in a way that doesn't detract from the story. And the author here doesn't do that. I don't think that there was a single incident where she introduces a term well. She does a lot of incidences where she introduces it in ways that's just not right. It's not good. Um, to give you a few examples, there are three categories that it tends to fall into. Category one is anything where she will introduce something and then shortly afterwards she'll explain it. So, a great example of this is when she introduces the palace, Golvahar. She does this in page 5, which is the very beginning of the book, and I'm going to it's chapter 1 essentially. It's essentially the beginning of the book. And I'm going to read a passage from the book here. From the roof of Golvahar, Soria could almost believe that she existed. So that's the first paragraph, the first sentence of chapter 1. Now there is a prologue. So this is not the first thing you read in the book, but the thing is when I read this, instead of my brain focusing on the second part, on the fact that she could almost believe she existed and the questions that went wrong with it, my first question was, what is Golvahar? I knew it was a building, but I didn't know what it was. There's literally nothing to tell you the significance of this building or how that might relate to the character. We know it's named, but that could mean literally anything. Moving into the next paragraph, the roof was a dangerous place, a painful luxury. Standing at the edge, she could see the garden spread out in front of the palace, lush and beautiful as always. But beyond that, beyond the gates of Gulvahar, was the rest of the world, far larger than she could ever imagine. A city full of people encircled the palace. A road led south down to the central desert, to other provinces and other cities, and on to the very edge of Adashar. Beyond that were more kingdoms, more lands, more people. So you're getting it. It's not until the third sentence that you even know what Golvahar is. It takes 3 sentences to do that, and she ends up going into a lot of detail on things that are not really that important. She's setting a scene, but but that's not what's going to draw you into the story. What's going to draw you into the story is the character. She's basically ignoring character development and establishment of character in favor of description of the setting. And it's not really a it doesn't really tell you much. she's does this nice long paragraph where it doesn't really tell you anything useful about either the setting or the people. And that's just it. You have this like one little throwaway statement. She could almost believe that she existed, and then there's there's nothing. There's nothing to reinforce that. And you combine the mystery of what is Golvahar that starts in the very beginning, oh, sorry, of this passage, and then you delve into massive amounts of description, and you're just ignoring the most important part of the story, which is the characters. And it's not a good look. It's really not. So that's the first. So she does explain that it's a palace almost immediately after, but she doesn't front load with that. She doesn't explain that it's a palace right from the start, which means that you end up in a situation where the question is not about why does she feel like she almost exists, rather than what is Gulbahar. Like, we need to be focusing on the characters, and she's not. She's focusing on setting the scene, which is great as long as you move the story forward. We have things progressing, and it's one, two, three, four. There's like four to five paragraphs before you actually get to the point where anything is happening. I mean, you're on to the next page. You're like here before it even, indicates what's going on. For the second category, which is, I'm sorry, I have my notes on the screen. That's why. The second category is ones where a word is introduced but isn't specified immediately what it is. It doesn't immediately follow with a description or an explanation. And you have to kind of work from context clues over time to figure out what it means. A great example of this is Azatan. Azatan apparently means like a soldier of some sort or guard, etc. And, a warrior. But it's never explicitly stated that way. The way it's presented is kind of, there's an implication that it is hereditary. So it could be a nobility thing, but you find out later, these are people who have it says here that they have uniforms, so it could be it could be a soldier, it could be a noble person, because a lot of the times they don't have uniforms per se, but it's very common throughout history for there to be strict delineations of who is allowed to wear different types of clothing or colors in different cultures based upon your caste system. So that's very much a possibility. And there was another word in here early on. It was the same, but I'm not going to worry about it because I don't see it off the top of my head. But the third category is ones that are never explained. So a great example of this, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing this correctly. So Spabed, Spahbed, that is never explained. There is never a instance in the entire book when she explains what that word means. I had to look it up on Wikipedia. Found out it was like a general or something like that. But like she literally never mentions it. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the author's note at the end to see if I just missed it there. But I'm pretty sure I didn't. Yeah, it's not in there. So this is a word that she never mentions what it means. She just presents it, puts it out there, and then expects you to know what ancient Persian terminology is, which is kind of ridiculous, honestly. So the next thing I would say that I had a problem with in the book was poor story structure. And most of this had to do with the first half of the book up to page about 130 or so. This is when the middle of the story structure happened and things started to come in line and make more sense. The first thing is that I realized at some point I don't know what the inciting incident of the book is. I have some kind of guesses, but because it didn't spark a intention in the main character, I don't really know. It's like usually what you have in books is you have an inciting incident, then you may have a debate section where the main character is kind of hemming and hawing. What do I want to do? How am I going to deal with this inciting incident? How am I going to change and be driven towards action? But the thing is, the inciting incident, which I believe is meeting a div in the dungeon, is which I think that's the inciting incident. But like I said, because there's never any decision on her part to take action after that or to change her life in some way, it doesn't really feel like an inciting incident. In reality, you end up with her meeting the div in the dungeon, Parvina. I'm going to call her Parvina. I don't know what her actual how you pronounce her name, but I'm going to call her Parvina. She's an important character all throughout the book, and um, so that feels like the inciting incident when she meets her. But after that, you get a prolonged debate section. And when I say prolonged, I mean prolonged. It lasts for like over 100 pages. Like, I've never seen this in a book before. I've never seen this in anything before. I have never, ever, ever seen any storytelling where someone puts an inciting incident and then has the debate section lead up right up until the character makes the decision and then acts. Like, literally, there's maybe like a couple pages between when she makes the decision to break her curse and when she actually does it. Like, even as she's making these moves to break her curse, like to just learn about how she can break her curse, and like even as she is taking action throughout the first half of the book, she still hasn't made the decision on what she's going to do. There's still this constant flux back and forth on, is she going to break the curse or is she not? And it's kind of like, well, I'll get the information. I'll figure out what I need to do in order to break the curse, but I'm not really decided on if I'm actually going to do it. And that's not really good storytelling. It's really not. And the truth is, there's a lot of pages here where nothing much happens. Like, it doesn't feel like anything happens. And like that's actually in my notes is I don't know what's going on. It's chaotic and weird and nothing makes sense. Nothing feels like it's a strict progression from point A to point B, or cause and effect relationship. And I don't feel like there's like plot holes necessarily. It's just that the way the POV is so chaotic with how she doesn't have a specific trajectory, specific decision that she's made. It makes it so it doesn't feel it doesn't it feels chaotic. It does. It doesn't feel like there's a clear progression of events going forward. I mean, and again, this could just be me. Maybe other people have read it and they have not felt the same way, but this is how it felt to me. It did not feel like this was character is in their beginning world. They're, in this case it would be being cursed, living her life in isolation, etc., etc. She meets a div, decides she's going to break her curse, takes actions in order to do so, and then regrets her decisions. That would be a clear progression where everything she's doing moving forward is clearly in pursuit of this goal for her. And that would work, but that's not really what you see here. there is a constant, even after the middle of the story, there's a constant, um, should I, shouldn't I, with regard to what she is planning to do, what she has done, what she will do, how she views things, how she views her family, how she views the curse. It's it's constantly just wishy-washy. And that's that kind of brings me into my next point, which is Soria, the main character, is not a very good protagonist. Like, when you're dealing with a protagonist, you want somebody who is decisive to a certain extent. De- Debate sections where they're questioning things or trying to decide what they want to do should usually be relatively brief. You want somebody who's going to take action. You want someone who's going to be decisive, because this is a story, you know? And this character is not decisive at all. The rare moments where she makes a decisive decision and chooses to take action is usually very spur of the moment, very impulsive, and even after she's made a decision, a lot of the time she doesn't know what she's doing. So then she'll just kind of wallow and not really do anything towards that, just waiting for an opportunity. And if she sees an opportunity, she takes it. And it's like, this is not really good storytelling. Like, there's no plan here. And like, that being said, plans fail. Plans get wrenches thrown in the works. It happens. But seeing a distinctive plan and knowing where the story is going, which is another thing, going back to poor story structure, I had no idea where this story was going. None. Right up until the big bad guy shows up, I had no idea where this was going. Like, I like a good twist just as much as the next person, but this didn't feel like a twist. It felt like I was blindsided. Because up until that point, it just felt like the whole point of the story was how she felt about her curse. And I could have very easily seen it with the way that the author was presenting things, that the entire story would be about her breaking her curse. And she breaks her curse midway through the book, and then a big bad shows up, and now the entire story is changed. It's all about the big bad. And this is weird. It really is weird. Like, if the big bad had been presented in a more cohesive way, say closer to the inciting incident, um and made more significant, like if the author had put more effort into her interrogating the Div in order to try to figure out what was going on and why the Divs were becoming more organized. Like, if that was something that was made a bigger part of the story early on, the story would have been better situated. It would have felt better. And like, if the reader is following along as you have the main character working for her brother, who's the Shah, and trying to pull information out of this Div that's in their dungeon, while simultaneously developing romantic interests in this Div, connecting with her emotionally, and like being, maybe manipulated into breaking her curse. Like that, I could see that. Like, having multiple levels of things going on. You have the romantic plot going on. You have the fate of their country going on, where she's trying to, support her brother, and having her, like considering finding a way and pursuing breaking her curse, and having these things happen simultaneously. But you don't really have that. The author kind of just lets go of the whole trying to interrogate the Div thing very easily. Like, the character will, try to talk to her, get information out of her, interrogate her, And then we'll go weeks without any interaction with the Div. She won't go there. She won't talk to her. She'll just hem and haw and stuff like that. Like I said, she's very wishy-washy. And instead of like focusing on breaking her curse or focusing on trying to figure out what's going on with the Divs, she walks away and does nothing. And so it kind of makes the threat of the Divs organizing not really that important sounding in the long run. It doesn't feel like it's something that we need to worry about, so you get blindsided when it becomes a thing midway through the book. And I don't like that. It like she kind of like teases it a little bit, and she does put these little like tidbits that can kind of hint to you, oh, this is something that'll come up later. It's the was it the can't remember what the name of the concept is, but if like you introduce a gun in act 1, you have to use it in act 3 or something like that. And she does kind of do that she does introduce these things and then present them as something important later. Like a great example is introducing serpentine characteristics into a character early on and then revealing that the person really does have serpentine characteristics and is a Div. So there's things like this that she does do a decent job of doing that, and I think I can absolutely respect that. That was done well, but she doesn't really do a good job of presenting the importance of the Div threat in the first half of the book. It feels very distant, like it's not important, like it's just a kind of the background of her own personal story. It doesn't feel like that's important to the main plot line. And then it suddenly becomes important to the main plot line, and it's kind of weird that it just presents itself halfway through the book. So going back to why I find the MC terrible, first off, yeah, like I said, she's wishy-washy. She has a tendency of hemming and hawing on a decision until moments before she makes it, or as she makes it, she finally makes a decision and is decisive in the moment, and then immediately is wishy-washy again, and it's kind of annoying as a character. I don't like it. I don't want a character who's just constantly, I will, I will, I not. I don't know. I can't make up my mind. And it's like, just do something. Just make up your mind. Just do something. I don't even care if it's the right thing. You can screw up as many times as you want to. Just do something. Make up your mind. Please. Another thing I don't like about her is the way she constantly blames herself for things. And more often than not, the things she blames herself for are just not in her control. She blames herself for her curse, for breaking her curse, for I can't even remember all the things she blames herself for, honestly. It's really bad. Some of it is stuff that the Shamar, which is the big bad guy, some of it is stuff he did. He's very manipulative of her, and he just kind of like nudges that even more, keeps manipulating and poking at her guilt to make her feel more guilty about the things that she does. And he really just minimizes his impact into these things. She also takes the blame weirdly for things her mom did. And I feel like it brings into another thing that I don't like about the book, which is the fact that the author just completely and utterly dismisses blatant child abuse. This curse, the girl is poisonous curse thing that her mother put on her willingly. And sorry, spoiler alert. Her mother did it to her. She did it to protect her, but she still did it to her. That is child abuse. Forcing a child who's only a few days old to never be able to experience skin-to-skin contact without killing someone is child abuse. Let's be clear here. Infants need skin-to-skin contact. It is important for their development. Now, I'm not a childhood development type of person, like expert or anything like that, but I know that's important. I also know that your relationship with your primary caregiver is extremely important to establishing attachment styles. This is a psychological concept, okay? And it is extremely important. It is one of the things that can result in a lot of mental health problems later on in life. Some of the most common mental health problems can be attributed to poor attachment styles. It's, for example, really common for autistic people to have poor attachment styles because of the the difficulty between a primary caregiver and the autistic person to connect properly. And so this is something that would have been a significant problem for the main character. She would have had a terrible attachment style. I mean, and it would have had devastating consequences on her. And you can see it. You can see it through a combination of her mother gaslighting her, through her not knowing how to connect with people. She really struggles a lot. She's extremely lonely, and you can see it. And it's just really, it's dismissed about exactly how much this is abusive. This is neglect. This is a child who's had almost no human contact throughout most of her life. Like, she's had no friends, no caregivers, no nothing for most of her life. And this was an intentional choice by her mom. And the thing is, I could think of it's not just the fact that her mom did this to her that's bad. Like, the cursing her with the inability to touch people. That's bad. But it gets worse because it's not just the mom that her mom did this to her, but also the fact that how her mom presented the information to her. She treated it like a curse. And then she punished her daughter with isolation for said curse. Instead, what she could have done is tried to present it in a more positive light and give her daughter as much of her social needs as possible, keep her connected to her family, present it as protection rather than a curse, explain the threat that's that she is under, and present it in a positive light so that she can develop more positive relationships. She still wouldn't be able to have contact by touch, but she would still have those relationships with her family. She would still have her friends, etc. It would have to be very carefully done because obviously you don't want to touch anybody, but you could present this in a more positive light, and her mother didn't, and it was really ugly. Additionally, the whole thing with the curse was she was protecting her from the shamar, who was promising to someday marry her. Which means you could have waited to do this curse until she was older. You could have waited until she was a teenager, maybe, so that she could have had a good development and, explain to her, this is to protect you from this really big bad person, a div, a really bad div. And that is absolutely something that she could have done. She could have explained it to her daughter, allowed her daughter to accept it, or even have a say in it. Did she do any of that? Nope. No, she lied to her daughter over and over again, creating even worse relationships in the family and breaking the family apart with her lies and secrets. It's it's such a bad family dynamic, and it is absolutely child abuse. And it really bothers me because the author doesn't bring it up and even tries to present it in a positive light. She tries to justify what the mother did as being a good thing, and in the end, it gets accepted as being a good thing. Even though, like I said, her mother isolated, shamed her, neglected her, most of her needs. I mean, seriously, and it's just really bad. Another thing, moving on, that I don't know how to think about is something that I didn't know about until the author's note. So I read the author's note after I'd finished the book, and there's a part where, and I'm going to read my notes here, and I'm going to quote, She calls the cosmetology a fantastical, fictionalized, and truncated version of Zoroastrian beliefs from ancient times. And that's the end of the quote. And I don't know what to think about this. Like, I think it's really cool that she took stories from her culture, fairy tales, mythologies, etc., and adapted them and made it into an interesting story that was inspired by it. And I like that. I think that's really cool. But Zoroastrian religion is a religion. It's a religion that's believed in modern times. There are people who are actively practicing it. And this is something that I always feel uncomfortable with when people take from other religions and tweak it, change it, etc. And that's absolutely what she did. She literally says here a fantastical, fictionalized, and truncated version. So she changed it. She manipulated it, changed it, and she's actually specifying here that she did that. And for me, this is something that I'm really sensitive to because I feel like it's really important that we respect each other's religions. Religions are very sensitive things, they're seen as literally sacred. And so, even though this is a branch of Zoroastrian religion that is no longer practiced, it is connected to Zoroastrian religion. And I don't know what to think about that. I don't know if this is good or bad or if it's cultural appropriation of some sort. You know, it is her culture, but I do think it's also possible to appropriate your own culture. You know, if you are, say, someone who has a place of higher privilege in society and the rest of your culture doesn't, you can potentially appropriate your own culture by using it for your own gain. So I don't know what to think about that. So because I am all about the happy endings, I'm going to end this video with some things I did like about the book. I should say that, first off, I didn't hate this book. It may sound like it because I'm very ranty right now. I've been talking this entire video about all the things I did not like about the book, but I did actually enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy the first half. And there are definitely things that I'm kind of nitpicky about, and I wanted to talk about that. And that's the main reason I wanted to do this book review. I wanted to talk about the things I didn't like, because what else are you going to do in a book review but talk about all the trash? You know? And so let's get into, first off, my favorite scenes or my favorite lines, etc. So on page 126, there's a quote I have here. "I'm your favorite story," said the Shamar. And I love that line. So this is the point where the Shamar presents himself for the first time. And earlier in the book, he had asked her, when he was pretending to be someone else, he had asked her what her favorite story was, and she told him about her story that she knew of the Shamar. And this is a very, very ominous line, because he's just shown that he's betrayed her, that he's actually a div, and it's a very, like, dark, ominous thing. And then he's like, "I'm your favorite story." And it's very threatening, and I love it. It's a great way. I think it might actually end a chapter. Let me check. So this was like, yeah, right there. I have such a hard time with this. "I'm your favorite story," said the Shamar. You know, and I love that line. And I thought it was really good. Uh, there's there's another point, page 200, that I thought was really cool, and I'm gonna try to read it. So, when Parvana returned, her hands were sticky with tree sap. "Roll up your sleeves." Surya considered questioning her, but something about the excited glow of Parvana's eyes and their sudden rush through the forest made her want to play along. She rolled up the sleeves of her dress, which were hopelessly dingy by now, and said, "Now what? Hold out your arms." Surya obeyed, her stomach already flipping in anticipation because she could guess what would come next. Parvana stepped forward and brushed her hands along the insides of Surya's forearms, and Surya's entire spine straightened at once, her breath catching in her throat. "What are you doing?" she said in an exhale. "Hush," Parvana said. "You'll see." Once Surya's forearms and her palms were coated with tree sap, Parvana stepped away, leaning her back against the nearest tree trunk. "Now wait," she whispered. Ordinarily, Surya might have felt ridiculous standing in the middle of a forest with tree sap on her outstretched arms, but the forest was alive. She felt it pulsing all around her, and so she knew she wasn't simply standing, but waiting with arms open in embrace whatever envoy the forest was about to send to her. She didn't have to wait long. She heard it first, a fluttering sound that seemed to come from the air, and then something tickled her arm. When she looked down, she saw a gray-brown moth settled on her left forearm, wings opening and closing leisurely. Surya barely breathed, afraid she would scare it away, or worse, that it would go still and fall dead to the ground, as that first butterfly did so many years ago. But her skin was covered in tree sap, not poison, and so the moth didn't die. And soon it was joined by others. One, two, a third that landed on the very center of her palm. To them, she was no different from one of the trees, a source of nourishment and life, not death or destruction. Surya laughed, and her eyes were blurry with tears. Now she understood why Parvana had brought her here. Here in the forest, far enough away to forget about Azad and the Deeves and her family, Surya allowed herself to enjoy the absence of her curse without guilt or complication. She would return to Arzur, and she would find the Simorg's feather, and she would help save her family, but for now, she would marvel at the brush of moth wings against her skin. She looked up at Parvana, suddenly self-conscious. Parvana was still leaning against the tree trunk, her arms crossed over her chest, watching Surya with a small smile on her lips. It was the first time Surya remembered seeing her smile in earnest, and she wondered if the same was true for her, if this was the first time she had seen Surya genuinely smile. "Thank you," Surya called to her. The word felt weak compared to the gratitude she felt. I just really liked that scene. I thought it was beautiful, and it's really one of those key moments in the relationship between Parvana and Surya, the main character, and that brings me to the romance. So I can't really decide if this is like a fantasy with romantic elements or a fantasy romance. I'm kind of leaning towards fantasy romance because the romance itself is so very important to the story, to actually defeating the big bad guy. Like, it really is central in that way. And the ending is an HEA. She goes off into the sunset with her love interest Parvana, and I kind of love the fact that this was actually a a story with a bi or pan main character who ends up in a lesbian relationship with a demon, essentially. I love it. I thought it was great, and I love the ending. I love a happy ending. I everyone deserves a happy ending as far as I'm concerned, and I think these two desperately needed it. I hope in the world Soria does end up happily ever after, and I don't have anything else to say. I guess have you guys read this book? What do you think? Did what you think coincide with any of the things I said? Were the things that I didn't say that you want to bring up? Just let me know in the comments and we can have a discussion about it. Other than that, you can find videos on the screen. If you like this video, consider subscribing and hitting the bell. And if you want to connect with me or my content in any other ways, you can find lots of links in the description below. And I'll have an affiliate link if you do want to actually buy this book on Amazon if you're in the US. So until next time, bye.